They called me the help in my own house. For 15 years, I scrubbed their floors, cooked their meals, and swallowed their insults, until the day a lawyer's phone call revealed I owned everything they'd been stealing from me. This is the story of how I went from invisible servant to corporate powerhouse, and how my own family's greed became their downfall. If you want to see karma served ice cold, stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far the story travels. I remember the exact moment I became nothing. It wasn't when my husband died. It wasn't even when Daniel and Vanessa moved into what had been my home for 30 years. No, it was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the funeral, when Vanessa walked into the kitchen and said, "Margaret, we're having guests tonight. Try not to embarrass us." Not Mom. Not even Margaret, dear. Just Margaret, like I was staff. I was standing at the sink, hands deep in soapy water, and I felt something inside me shrink. I didn't say anything. What could I say? My son stood right there in the doorway, scrolling through his phone, and he didn't even look up. That was 15 years ago. 15 years of becoming smaller and smaller in a house that used to be mine. 15 years of watching my son transform from the boy who used to bring me dandelions into a stranger who couldn't meet my eyes. 15 years of Vanessa's perfectly manicured cruelty, delivered with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really begins. To the dinner party that finally broke something inside me that had been cracking for over a decade. It was a Saturday in late October, the kind of evening where the air smells like wet leaves and wood smoke, and the light through the windows turns everything golden. I remember thinking how beautiful the house looked, how I'd spent the entire day making it perfect, because that's what I did now. I made things perfect for other people. I'd been up since 5 that morning. Vanessa wanted everything just so for her charity board members, women who wore their wealth like armor and judged everything from the thread count of the napkins to the way you pronounced bruschetta. I'd cleaned bathrooms until my knees ached, polished silver until I could see my reflection, old, tired, invisible, arranged flowers that cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a month. "Margaret!" Vanessa's voice cut through the house like a knife. I was in the kitchen, pulling the beef Wellington from the oven, sweat running down my back, despite the October chill. "Yes," I called back, setting the pan down with shaking hands. She appeared in the doorway, a vision in cream silk and diamond studs that caught the light. At 45, Vanessa was the kind of beautiful that took work, yoga at dawn, facials every week, a chef-prepared meal plan she never followed because she barely ate anyway. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless. She looked at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "The canapes are uneven," she said. I glanced at the silver tray I'd spent 40 minutes arranging. "I'm sorry, Never mind, there's no time now. Just stay in the kitchen, would you? Once you've served the first course, I'll handle the rest." My stomach tightened. I thought I was serving all the courses. "You thought wrong." Her smile was glacial. "Some of these women are very particular about a presentation. I think it's better if I handle it." Presentation. The word hung in the air between us. What she meant was, "You're too old, too shabby, too embarrassing to be seen." I was wearing my good slacks, the black pair I'd bought on sale 3 years ago, and a simple white blouse. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun. I'd thought I looked presentable, apparently not. "Of course," I heard myself say, "whatever you think is best." Vanessa's eyes flickered with something. Satisfaction, maybe, or contempt. With her, it was hard to tell the difference. "Oh, and Margaret, when you do bring out the first course, use the service entrance. I don't want you walking through the main dining room more than necessary." The service entrance, like I was the caterer in my own house. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and she swept away in a cloud of expensive perfume that made my eyes water. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the beef Wellington I'd slaved over, feeling something hot and angry pressing behind my eyes. But I didn't cry. I'd learned not to cry. Tears changed nothing, and besides, I had work to do. The guests arrived at 7. I heard them from the kitchen, the bright laughter, the exclamations over the foyer's new chandelier, which Vanessa had installed last month, replacing the one Richard and I had chosen together, the clink of champagne glasses, Daniel's voice, warm and charming, playing the gracious host, Vanessa's practiced laugh, light as air. No one mentioned me. Why would they? They didn't know I existed. At 7:30, I loaded the first course onto the serving cart, a delicate autumn squash soup with sage oil and toasted pumpkin seeds, served in the Limoges bowls that had been my mother's. My hands were steady as I wheeled the cart toward the dining room, taking the long way around through the back hallway, using the service entrance like I'd been told. The dining room was stunning. Candlelight flickered across the mahogany table Richard and I had bought at an estate sale in Connecticut 30 years ago. The good china gleamed. Fresh roses spilled from crystal vases. Through the doorway, I could see Vanessa at the head of the table, my seat once, looking radiant as she entertained her guests. 10 women, all dressed like they were attending a gala, all wearing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. I served the soup silently, moving around the table like a ghost. No one looked at me. No one said thank you. One woman, a blonde with a face so tight from plastic surgery she could barely smile, actually waved her hand dismissively when I approached, as if I were a fly. I bit the inside of my cheek and kept moving. "Vanessa, darling, this house is absolutely spectacular," one of the women said. She was older than the others, maybe 60, with white hair styled in an elegant bob and enough diamonds to fund a small country. "How long have you lived here?" 15 years, Vanessa said smoothly. "Daniel inherited it from his father." Inherited? I nearly dropped the ladle. Daniel didn't inherit this house. Richard and I bought it in 1978. We scraped together every penny we had for the down payment. I painted every room myself while I was 7 months pregnant with Daniel. I planted the garden. I chose every doorknob, every light fixture. This was my house, but I said nothing. I just finished serving and retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding. I listened to their conversation while I prepared the second course. The kitchen had a serving window that looked into the dining room, ostensibly so staff could monitor the meal's progress, but really so I could hear every word of my own erasure. "So Vanessa, tell us about your charity work," someone said. "I heard you're spearheading the new children's hospital wing." "Oh, it's been such a passion project," Vanessa gushed. "You know, giving back is so important to Daniel and me. We're blessed with so much, this beautiful home, our resources, and we feel it's our duty to help those less fortunate. We, like she'd earned any of it, like Daniel had." I gripped the edge of the counter, fighting down nausea. "And Daniel's business is doing well?" the older woman asked. "Extraordinarily well," Vanessa said. "His father left him a small stake in Hale Industries, and Daniel's been brilliant about growing it. We're expanding into 3 new markets this quarter." Small stake. I froze. That wasn't right. Richard had been a senior partner at Hale Industries for 35 years. When he died, he'd owned, God, I didn't even know exactly how much. The lawyers had been vague, and I'd been so deep in grief I hadn't pushed. Daniel had handled everything. He'd said there were complications, legal delays, nothing for me to worry about. "Just focus on healing, Mom," he'd said, squeezing my hand. "I'll take care of everything." And I'd believed him. Because he was my son. Because Richard would have wanted him to step up. Because I was 63 years old and exhausted and broken, and it was easier to let someone else handle the complicated things. "Vanessa, you must give me your decorator's number," another woman said. "This place is a masterpiece." "Oh, I did most of it myself," Vanessa said, and I heard the smile in her voice. "I have a vision for spaces. Daniel always says I should have been an interior designer." I designed this room. I'd chosen the wallpaper, the crown molding, the built-in bookshelves. I'd spent months researching period-appropriate fixtures when we renovated in the 90s. But sure, Vanessa did it. I plated the main course, the beef Wellington with roasted vegetables and truffle mashed potatoes, and forced myself to keep moving, one foot in front of the other. Serve the food, stay silent, disappear. I was halfway through serving the entrees when it happened. "Vanessa, is that your housekeeper in the kitchen?" one of the women asked. She was younger, maybe 40, with the kind of predatory curiosity that made my skin crawl. I saw Vanessa's shoulders tense, just slightly. "Oh, that's Margaret, Daniel's mother." There was a pause, a very long pause. "Your mother-in-law lives with you." The woman's voice dripped with something between pity and horror. "She helps around the house," Vanessa said smoothly. "After Daniel's father passed, she didn't really have anywhere else to go. We took me in, like I was a stray dog, like this wasn't my house." "How generous of you," the woman said, and the whole table murmured agreement. I stood there holding a plate of beef Wellington, feeling my face burn. Daniel was sitting right there, not 10 feet from me, and he said nothing. He just cut into his meat and chewed, his eyes fixed on his plate. "Well, family takes care of family," Vanessa said, her voice sweet as poison, "even when it's challenging." One of the women laughed. "Oh, I could never do it. My mother-in-law is lovely, but having her live with us, I'd lose my mind." "It's certainly an adjustment," Vanessa agreed, "but Margaret's been helpful. She's not as spry as she used to be, of course, but she does what she can." Not as spry. I was 72, not 90. I'd worked a 12-hour day to make this dinner happen. Still, another woman chimed in, "It must be difficult, having someone else in your home all the time, no privacy." "We manage," Vanessa said. "We've given her the guest suite on the 3rd floor, away from the main living areas. That helps. The guest suite. The smallest bedroom in the house, tucked under the eaves, with a window that stuck, and radiator that clanked all winter. They'd moved me up there 8 years ago, right after they renovated the 2nd floor. My old bedroom, the master suite Richard and I had shared for 3 decades, was now Vanessa's personal sanctuary, complete with a spa bathroom and walk-in closet. I set down the last plate with shaking hands and turned to leave. "Margaret," Vanessa's voice stopped me. I turned slowly. Every eye in the room was on me now, and I felt pinned, like a butterfly under glass. "Yes?" Vanessa's smile was bright and sharp. "Would you mind clearing these soup bowls and perhaps opening another bottle of the Chateau Neuf du Pape? The 2009, not the 12. Not a request, a command." "Of course," I said quietly. I gathered the bowls, my hands trembling, and retreated to the kitchen. Behind me I heard one of the women whisper, "Poor thing," and the others murmured agreement. Poor thing, like I was pathetic, like I deserved their pity. I stood at the sink, breathing hard, my vision blurring. The bowls clattered as I set them down too hard, and one of them, my mother's Limoges, cracked right down the middle. For 15 years I'd swallowed it, the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty, the slow, steady erasure of everything I'd been. I told myself it was temporary, that Daniel would remember who I was, that Vanessa would soften, that I'd find my footing eventually. But standing there, staring at that cracked bowl, I finally understood the truth. This was my life now. This was all it would ever be, unless something changed. I served dessert, a chocolate torte with raspberry coulis that took me 3 hours to make, and retreated to the kitchen. I wasn't invited to join them for coffee. I never was. By 10 o'clock, the guests were leaving. I heard them gathering in the foyer, lavishing praise on Vanessa, telling her what a beautiful home she had, what a lovely evening it had been. "You're so lucky," one woman said. "You have everything." "I really do," Vanessa agreed. When the last car pulled away, I heard Daniel's footsteps on the stairs. He was going to bed, bypassing the kitchen entirely, not checking in, not saying thank you, not acknowledging the 12 hours I'd spent making his wife's party perfect. I waited until the house was silent. Then I began cleaning. The dining room was a disaster. Wine stains on the tablecloth, lipstick smudged glasses, crumbs ground into the antique rug. It took me 2 hours to set it right, my back screaming the whole time. At midnight, I finally climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. My legs felt like lead. My hands were raw from scrubbing. Every part of me ached. I passed the 2nd floor landing and saw light under Daniel's bedroom door. I heard Vanessa's laugh, low and satisfied. She was happy. Of course she was. She had everything, and I had nothing. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, and thought about Richard. We'd met in college, 2 broke kids with big dreams. He'd been studying business and I'd been in art history, and we'd bonded over terrible coffee in the library at 2 in the morning. He'd proposed on a beach in Maine with a ring he'd saved 6 months to buy. We'd gotten married in my parents' backyard. For 40 years we'd built a life together. This house, his career, our son. Everything I had, I'd built with him. And when he died, it had all disappeared. Not just Richard, not just the love and partnership and shared history. Everything. The lawyers had talked to Daniel, not me. The bank accounts had been transferred to Daniel's name for simplicity. The house had been put in a trust that Daniel managed. I'd signed papers I didn't understand because I was drowning in grief, and everyone kept saying, "Don't worry, we'll handle it." And I'd let them. Because I trusted my son, because I was tired, because it was easier than fighting. But lying there in that small, cold room, listening to the radiator clank, I felt something shift inside me, something that had been asleep for 15 years, anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. This was cold, quiet, the kind of anger that comes from finally seeing clearly. I'd been played. For 15 years I'd been played, and I had no idea how deep it went. The next morning I woke to Vanessa's voice echoing up the stairs. "Margaret, the kitchen's a mess." I dragged myself out of bed, my whole body protesting. I had slept maybe 3 hours. My reflection in the mirror looked haggard, grey hair escaping its bun, dark circles under my eyes, lines carved deep around my mouth. When had I gotten so old? I made my way downstairs, each step an effort. Vanessa was in the kitchen, still in her silk robe, her hair perfect despite the early hour. She was standing by the counter, arms crossed, surveying the room with obvious displeasure. "I thought you cleaned last night," she said. I looked around. The kitchen was spotless. I'd made sure of it. "I did." "Well, you missed the coffee stain by the espresso machine, and the floor feels sticky." I'd mopped the floor twice. "I'll take care of it," I said quietly. "See that you do." Vanessa opened the refrigerator, frowned at the contents. "We're out of almond milk. I'll add it to the list. Today, Margaret, I need it for my smoothie." It was Sunday. The store didn't open until noon. "Of course," I said anyway. Vanessa swept out of the kitchen without another word, and I stood there staring at the non-existent coffee stain, feeling that cold anger grow a little bit stronger. This couldn't be my life. It couldn't. The phone call came on Tuesday. I was folding laundry in the 3rd floor hallway. Daniel's expensive dress shirts that had to be handled just so. Vanessa's delicate silk blouses that I hand-washed because the dry cleaner was too rough. When my cell phone rang, I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, probably a scam, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Hale? Margaret Hale?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes? This is Robert Chen from Whitmore and Associates. I'm calling regarding your late husband's estate." My heart stuttered. "I'm sorry, who?" "Robert Chen. I'm an attorney. I've been trying to reach you for several weeks, but the number I had on file was disconnected." That would be my old cell phone. Daniel had switched me to a cheaper plan last year, said it would save money. The new phone had a different number that I'd given to almost no one. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, sitting down on the floor right there in the hallway, laundry forgotten. "What is this about?" "It's regarding your husband Richard's shares in Hale Industries. There's been a significant development in the probate process, and we need to discuss your options." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My son handles all of that," I said. "Daniel Hale. He's been managing Richard's estate." There was a pause, a very long pause. Mrs. Hale, Robert Chen said carefully, I think we need to meet in person. Are you available tomorrow afternoon? Yes, I can be. Good. Can you come to our offices? And Mrs. Hale, I'd suggest coming alone. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. Why? Another pause. Let's just say there are some irregularities in how your late husband's estate has been handled. Irregularities you should be made aware of before discussing this with your son. My mouth went dry. What kind of irregularities? I'd rather explain in person. Tomorrow at 2, I'll text you the address. Okay, I whispered. And Mrs. Hale, don't mention this call to anyone yet, not until we've talked. He hung up before I could ask why. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by other people's laundry, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Irregularities. What did that mean? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed watching shadows crawl across the ceiling, my mind spinning through possibilities. Had there been a mistake in the estate? Was I owed something? Was Daniel in trouble? No, Daniel wouldn't. But even as I thought it, doubt crept in. The way he'd handled everything after Richard died, how quickly he'd taken over, how vague he'd been about the details. Just trust me, Mom, I've got this. And I had trusted him, because he was my son. At 2 a.m, I crept downstairs to Richard's old study. Daniel used it as a home office now, but I knew he kept files in there, financial records, legal documents. I'd never looked before, never questioned, never pushed. The door was unlocked. I felt like a thief as I slipped inside, closing the door softly behind me. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting everything in silver. The filing cabinet was locked, but I knew where Daniel kept the key. Taped under the desk drawer, same place Richard used to keep it. My hands shook as I opened the top drawer. Files. So many files, all labeled in Daniel's neat handwriting. Hale Industries quarterly reports, Hale Industries board minutes, Hale Industries stock certificates. I pulled out the stock certificate file and opened it. The top document was a share certificate in Daniel's name, 50,000 shares. I flipped to the next page, another certificate, Daniel's name, and another, page after page of stock certificates, all in my son's name, dating back 15 years. My vision blurred. Richard had owned shares in Hale Industries, a lot of them. He'd spent 35 years building that stake. We talked about it sometimes, how it would be our retirement, our security, Daniel's inheritance someday. But these certificates, they were dated within months of Richard's death. They'd been transferred to Daniel immediately, all of them. I kept flipping, my breath coming faster, looking for my name. It wasn't there. There was nothing with my name on it. According to these files, Richard had left me nothing. I sank into Daniel's desk chair, the file clutched in my shaking hands. That couldn't be right. Richard wouldn't have done that. We'd talked about our wills. We'd met with lawyers together. Richard had always said, "What are you doing?" I jumped, dropping the file, papers scattered across the floor. Daniel stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. I couldn't see his face, but his voice was cold. I asked you a question. I opened my mouth, closed it. My heart was hammering. I couldn't sleep, I finally said. I was just going through my private files. These were your father's files. These are my files in my office. He stepped into the room, and now I could see his expression. He looked angry, actually angry, in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Daniel, I got a call today from a lawyer about your father's estate. His jaw tightened. What lawyer? Robert Chen, from Whitmore and Associates. Something flickered across Daniel's face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. What did he want? He said there were irregularities. I stood up, papers crunching under my feet. He said I needed to come in tomorrow to discuss my options. Your options, Daniel repeated flatly. Regarding Richard's shares in Hale Industries. The silence stretched out between us. I told you I'd handle the estate, Daniel said finally. I've been handling it. Then why is a lawyer calling me about irregularities? I don't know. Probably a scam. You know how these things are. He knew Richard's name. He knew about the shares. He knew about Hale Industries. Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Mom, you're confused. I'm not confused. You are. You're upset and tired and you're not thinking clearly. That's why I've been handling everything. To protect you from exactly this kind of stress. Protect me? The words came out sharper than I intended. Or protect yourself. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? These certificates. I gestured at the scattered papers. They're all in your name. Every single one. Where are mine? There aren't any in your name. The casualness of it stole my breath. What? Dad left his shares to me to ensure the business stayed in family hands. He knew I'd take care of you. Richard would never... He did. Daniel's voice was firm, final. I can show you the will if you want. It's very clear. Everything went into a trust for my benefit, with provisions for your care. That's why you're living here. That's why Vanessa and I take care of you. Take care of me like I was a burden, like they were doing me a favor. I want to see the will, I said. Fine, tomorrow, but right now it's 3 a.m. and you're going through my private files like a thief. I think you should go back to bed. His tone was dismissive, patronizing, the way Vanessa talked to me, the way everyone in this house talked to me. I looked at my son, rarely looked at him, and saw a stranger. I have a meeting tomorrow at 2, I said quietly, with Robert Chen. Cancel it. No. Daniel's expression hardened. Mom, you're making a mistake. These people prey on grieving widows. They'll tell you whatever you want to hear, get you to sign something, and take whatever money you have left. I'm trying to protect you. Then come with me. He blinked. What? If you're really trying to protect me, come to the meeting. Help me understand what's going on. The silence stretched out. I have a conference call at 2, Daniel said finally. Cancel it. His jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. Then let me go alone. If it's a scam, I'll figure it out. If it's not, I took a breath. If it's not, then I need to know what's really going on with Richard's estate. There's nothing going on. Everything's been settled. Then you have nothing to worry about. We stared at each other across the scattered papers, across 15 years of silence and swallowed questions. Fine, Daniel said finally. Go to your meeting. Waste your time, but don't come crying to me when they try to scam you out of whatever's left of your savings. He turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the dark office. I stood there, trembling, looking at all those stock certificates with my son's name on them, and I thought, what have you done, Daniel? What have you... I didn't go back to bed. I sat in that office until dawn, surrounded by papers that proved my son had taken everything. My hands kept reaching for the stock certificates, reading Daniel's name over and over like maybe if I looked hard enough, my name would appear. It never did. At 6, I heard Vanessa's alarm go off. Then the shower. Then her footsteps on the stairs, heading to the kitchen for her morning smoothie. The one I was supposed to have almond milk ready for. I'd forgotten to go to the store. I should have cared. Should have scrambled to fix it before she noticed. But sitting there in the grey morning light, looking at 15 years of theft laid out in manila folders, I couldn't make myself move. Let her get her own damn almond milk. The thought was so shocking, so unlike me, that I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. Margaret, Vanessa's voice cut through the house like a blade. I closed the files carefully, put them back exactly as I'd found them, and locked the cabinet. My movements were mechanical, precise. I felt disconnected from my body, like I was watching someone else go through the motions. When I got to the kitchen, Vanessa was standing by the blender, arms crossed, still in her yoga clothes. I asked you to get almond milk. I know. She blinked. That was the wrong answer. The Margaret she knew would have apologized profusely, would have offered to run to the store right now, would have done anything to smooth over the inconvenience. Well, Vanessa said, are you going to get it? The store doesn't open until noon on Sundays. It's Tuesday, but I didn't make it yesterday. So go to the convenience store. They don't carry the organic brand you like. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Then I guess I'll have to make do without my smoothie. I guess so. We stared at each other. Something shifted in her expression, confusion maybe, or the first flicker of unease. Are you feeling all right? She asked. I'm fine. You look terrible. I didn't sleep well. Maybe you should see a doctor. You're getting to that age where things start falling apart. That age. Like I was ancient, decrepit. I was 72. Vanessa's mother was 75 and still ran marathons. Maybe, I said. Vanessa studied me for another moment, then shrugged and grabbed her purse. I have a tennis lesson. I'll be back around 3. Try to pull yourself together before then. We have dinner plans tonight. She left without saying goodbye. I stood in the kitchen, listening to her car pull out of the driveway, and felt that cold anger settle deeper into my bones. Dinner plans. That I'd be expected to cook, serve, and clean up from. That I wouldn't be invited to join in my own house. Not anymore, a voice whispered in my head. Not if what Robert Chen says is true. I looked at the clock. 8 hours until my meeting. 8 hours to decide if I was brave enough to hear the truth. I spent the morning cleaning. Old habits die hard, and besides, I needed to do something with my hands, or I'd go crazy thinking about that filing cabinet. But for the first time in 15 years, I cleaned differently. I didn't scrub the baseboards, didn't polish the silver, didn't fold Vanessa's delicates with tissue paper the way she liked. I did the bare minimum, and it felt like rebellion. At 1 o'clock, I went upstairs and changed into my best outfit. A navy dress I'd bought 5 years ago for a funeral and never worn again. It was too formal for a lawyer's meeting probably, but I wanted to look like someone who mattered, someone who deserved answers, someone who wasn't just the help. I put on my mother's pearl earrings, the only jewelry I still owned that Vanessa hadn't borrowed and never returned. In the mirror, I looked like a stranger, older than I remembered, tired, but there was something in my eyes that hadn't been there yesterday, fear maybe, or hope. I wasn't sure which scared me more. The law offices of Whitmore and Associates were in downtown Boston, in one of those old buildings with marble floors and brass fixtures that whispered money. I felt out of place the moment I walked through the doors, like everyone could see I didn't belong. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, asked my name. Margaret Hale, I have a 2 o'clock with Robert Chen. She typed something into her computer and her expression shifted, just slightly, but I caught it, like my name meant something. Of course, Mrs. Hale, he's expecting you, 3rd floor, suite 312. The elevator was one of those old cage types with a manual door. My hand shook as I pulled it closed. What was I doing here? Daniel had told me to cancel, had warned me these people were scammers. But Daniel had also lied to me for 15 years. The elevator lurched upward and my stomach lurched with it. Suite 312 was at the end of a long hallway lined with dark wood paneling and brass nameplates. I knocked, my knuckles barely making a sound. Come in. I pushed open the door. The office was smaller than I'd expected. Bookcases lined the walls, stuffed with leather-bound volumes that looked like they'd never been opened. A mahogany desk sat by the window, and behind it sat a man in his 50s with steel grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when I entered, extending his hand. Mrs. Hale, thank you for coming. I'm Robert Chen. His handshake was firm, professional. His eyes were kind. I didn't trust kind eyes anymore. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. I sat, clutching my purse in my lap like a shield. Robert Chen settled back into his chair and opened a file folder. For a long moment, he just looked at the papers inside, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Hale, he said finally, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. My heart was hammering. Okay. First, I need to ask, how much do you know about your late husband's estate, specifically his shares in Hale Industries? Not much, I admitted. After Richard died, my son Daniel handled everything. He said there were legal complications that it would take time to sort out. Did he tell you the value of those shares? No, just that Richard had a stake in the company. Robert Chen's jaw tightened. He pulled a document from the file and slid it across the desk. This is your late husband's final stock certificate, dated 2 weeks before his death. Can you read the number of shares listed? I looked down at the paper. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. 150,000 shares, I read aloud. That's correct. At current market value, those shares are worth approximately $42 million. The world tilted. 42 million. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did you say 42 million, give or take, depending on market fluctuations? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. $42 million. Richard had been worth $42 million when he died, and I'd been living like a servant in my own house. Mrs. Hale, are you all right? I looked up at Robert Chen. His face was blurry. Was I crying? I don't understand, I managed. Daniel said Richard left everything in a trust, for Daniel's benefit, with provisions for my care. That's partially true. Your husband did establish a trust, but according to the terms Richard specified, you were supposed to be the primary beneficiary of 70% of his estate, including all stock holdings. Daniel was to receive 30% with the understanding that he'd eventually inherit the rest upon your death. 70%, that was, I couldn't even do the math, nearly $30 million, mine. But I never, my voice cracked, I never received anything. I know. Robert Chen's expression was grim. That's the irregularity I mentioned. Shortly after your husband's death, someone filed amended trust documents with the probate court, changing the distribution percentages. According to these amendments, you were designated to receive only a modest monthly stipend, $1,500, while Daniel received full control of all assets, including the stock portfolio. $1,500, I'd never seen a penny of it. Who filed the amendments, I asked, though I already knew. Your son, Daniel Hale. He claimed you'd consented to the changes due to concerns about your ability to manage such a large estate at your age. The room was spinning. I never consented to anything. I never even saw those documents. I thought as much. Robert Chen pulled out another paper. This is the signature on the amended trust documents. He slid it across the desk. I stared at it. It looked like my signature, almost, but the loops were wrong. The slant was off. Someone had practiced, but not quite enough. That's not my signature, I said. No, I didn't think it was. He pulled the paper back. Mrs. Hale, I'm going to be frank with you. I believe your son committed fraud. He forged your signature on legal documents, filed them with the court, and has been systematically draining your trust fund for 15 years. Fraud, forgery, my son. My Danny, who used to bring me flowers, who used to fall asleep on my lap during movies, who cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. How did this happen? I asked. How did no one notice? Estate cases can take years to settle, especially complex ones involving business holdings. Your son was named executor, which gave him significant authority. He hired lawyers who answered to him, filed paperwork that went largely unexamined because estate courts are backlogged and understaffed. By the time everything was finalized, 5 years had passed. The forged amendments were buried in hundreds of pages of legal documents. Then how did you find them? Robert Chen leaned back in his chair. 3 months ago, Hale Industries underwent an internal audit. Part of that process involved verifying the ownership of all outstanding shares. When they contacted me to confirm Daniel's holdings, something seemed off. The numbers didn't match our records, so I started digging. And you found the fraud. I found inconsistencies, but I needed to speak with you before taking it further. He paused. Mrs. Hale, you need to understand something. If what I suspect is true, your son hasn't just stolen your inheritance. He's been using your shares to vote on corporate matters, collect dividends, and basically act as though he owns stock that legally belongs to you. That's securities fraud. That's a felony. A felony. My son was a criminal. What happens now? I asked. That depends on you. Robert Chen's voice was gentle. You have options. We can file a motion to invalidate the amended trust documents. We can demand an accounting of all assets. We can pursue criminal charges if you choose. But Mrs. Hale, I need to warn you, this will get ugly. Your son will fight. He'll hire expensive lawyers. He'll drag this out as long as possible. And there's a good chance the media will get involved. A story about a wealthy widow defrauded by her own son. That's headline news. I thought about Daniel's face last night, the anger, the dismissiveness, the way he'd looked at me like I was a nuisance. I want my money back, I said quietly. All of it? Every penny, and I want the house. Robert Chen blinked. The house? It's in my name. Richard and I bought it together in 1978. It should have transferred to me automatically when he died. But somehow it ended up in a trust that Daniel controls. I met his eyes. I want it back. A slow smile spread across Robert Chen's face. Mrs. Hale, I think we're going to get along very well. I left the law offices 2 hours later with a briefcase full of documents I didn't fully understand and a court date set for 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks to gather evidence. 3 weeks before I faced my son across a courtroom and called him a thief. 3 weeks before my life either changed completely or fell apart. The subway ride home felt surreal. All around me, people were living their normal lives, reading newspapers, listening to music, staring at their phones. None of them knew that the old woman in the navy dress sitting by the window had just discovered she was worth nearly $30 million. $30 million that her own son had stolen. I kept looking at my reflection in the dark subway window, expecting to see someone different, someone transformed, but I just looked tired and old and very, very angry. I got home at 5:30. Vanessa's car was in the driveway, which meant she was back from tennis, which meant she'd be expecting dinner. I let myself in through the front door, not the service entrance, the front door, and heard voices in the living room. Daniel was home early. They were arguing about something, their voices low and tense. I moved closer, staying in the hallway where they couldn't see me. Don't understand why you're worried, Vanessa was saying. She's not going to do anything. She went through my files last night. She knows something's wrong. My heart jumped. So what? She's a 72-year-old woman with no money and no options. What's she going to do? Hire a lawyer? She already did, Daniel said, and his voice was tight with stress. Robert Chen called my office today. He's representing her. Silence. Then Vanessa laughed. You're kidding. Do I sound like I'm kidding? Daniel, relax. So she hired some ambulance chaser. He's probably charging her whatever's left of her savings to file some pointless motion. It'll get thrown out and she'll be back to square one. Chen's not an ambulance chaser. He's a senior partner at Whitmore and Associates. They don't take cases unless they think they can win. More silence. What exactly can he prove? Vanessa asked, and now her voice was different, worried. I don't know. That's what scares me. Did you cover your tracks? I thought so. But if they start pulling records, comparing signatures. You forged her signature. You told me you forged her signature. Quiet, Daniel hissed. Jesus, Vanessa. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. We need to fix this, Vanessa said. Offer her something, a settlement, whatever it takes to make this go away. With what money? Everything's tied up in the company. If I start liquidating shares, people will ask questions. Then use the house. Put it in her name. Tell her she can live here rent-free for the rest of her life, and she drops the lawsuit. She already owns the house, Daniel snapped. Or she should. That's probably what Chen's arguing. Then we're screwed. Not necessarily. Daniel's voice dropped lower. I strained to hear. There might be another option. What? We declare her incompetent. get a medical evaluation, prove she's not mentally fit to manage her own affairs. A judge would appoint me as her guardian, and I'd maintain control of everything. My blood turned to ice. Incompetent. They were going to try to have me declared insane. Can you do that? Vanessa asked. If we can find the right doctor, someone who'll say she's suffering from dementia or something. She's old enough that it's plausible. Daniel, that's what, Vanessa? Cruel? She's been living off us for 15 years. Everything we have, everything we've built, it came from those shares. From Dad's company. She was never supposed to control any of it. She wouldn't know what to do with it. She might know enough to send you to prison. The words hung in the air. That's not going to happen, Daniel said finally. I'll talk to her. Make her understand that fighting this is pointless, that she's only going to embarrass herself. And if she doesn't listen, then we do what we have to do. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and walked as quietly as I could back to the front door, then opened and closed it loudly, like I was just arriving. I'm home, I called out, my voice shaking. Footsteps. Then Daniel appeared in the hallway, all smiles, like we hadn't been fighting 12 hours ago. Mom, how was your day? I looked at my son, at the stranger wearing my son's face, and felt something break inside me that I knew would never heal. Fine, I said, just fine. Dinner was tense. Vanessa had ordered Thai food, my least favorite, and they ate at the formal dining room table while I served them, just like always. Except it wasn't like always, because now I knew. I knew they'd stolen from me, knew they were planning to destroy me, knew that every kindness, every "we're taking care of you," every "we're family" had been a lie. So, Mom, Daniel said, his voice casual as I poured his wine, did you meet with that lawyer today? My hand didn't shake. I was proud of that. Yes. And he explained some things about your father's estate. What kinds of things? I set down the wine bottle and met his eyes. That I'm supposed to have shares in Hale Industries. Quite a lot of them, actually. Daniel's expression didn't change. Is that what he said? It is. And you believed him. Should I not have? He sighed, setting down his fork. Mom, I warned you. These lawyers, they see a vulnerable widow and they start filling her head with fantasies. Dad's estate was settled years ago. Everything was distributed according to his wishes. If this Chen guy is telling you otherwise, he's lying. So I don't own any shares. You own the stipend from the trust, $1,500 a month, which frankly, you've never even needed since you live here rent-free. $1,500 a month that I'd never seen a penny of. And the house, I asked, do I own that? Something flickered across Daniel's face. The house is complicated. How is it complicated? Your father and I bought it together. When he died, it should have become mine. It's in a family trust for tax purposes, but you have lifetime tenancy, which means you can live here as long as you want. As long as I behave, I said quietly. Daniel frowned. What? As long as I cook and clean and stay in my little room upstairs and don't ask questions. That's what you mean, isn't it? Vanessa set down her wine glass. Margaret, I think you're getting confused. I'm not confused. You're upset. This lawyer has obviously upset you. Maybe we should call him together tomorrow. Clear up these misunderstandings. There's no misunderstanding, I said. He showed me the documents, the original trust that your father set up, and the amended version that someone filed after he died. The silence was deafening. Someone, Daniel repeated, with my signature. Except it's not actually my signature, is it? Daniel stood up. Mom, I think you need to rest. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense. For the first time in 15 years, I'm making perfect sense. You're having some kind of episode. I'm not having an episode. My voice came out louder than I intended. Sharper. I'm finally seeing clearly. You stole from me, Daniel. You and your lawyers and your fake signatures. You took everything your father left me and you've been using it to fund this life while treating me like a servant in my own home. Daniel's face went red. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? I was shaking now, 15 years of silence erupting. I gave you everything. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. And the minute your father died, you turned into a stranger. You let her, I pointed at Vanessa, treat me like garbage. You moved me into the smallest bedroom. You made me cook and clean and disappear. And all of it was so you could steal what was mine. I didn't steal anything, Daniel roared. That money was mine. Dad built that company and I'm the one carrying on his legacy. You wouldn't know the first thing about managing those shares. So you decided for me. Yes, because you were a mess. You were falling apart. Someone had to take charge. Someone had to steal, you mean. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. Then Vanessa stood up, placing a hand on his arm. Daniel, don't. He took a breath, then another. When he spoke again, his voice was cold, controlled. You want to do this? Fine, we'll do this. But I'm warning you, Mom, you won't win. I have lawyers, resources, and all the documentation showing that you consented to the trust amendments. You'll spend whatever money you have left fighting a losing battle, and in the end, you'll have nothing. I already have nothing, I said. No, you have a roof over your head. You have food, you have security, you have us. But if you pursue this lawsuit, you'll lose all of that. Is that really what you want? To be alone, homeless, at your age? He was threatening me. My own son was threatening me. Get out, I said quietly. Daniel blinked. What? Get out of this house, both of you. This is my house. No, it's my house, and I want you out tonight. Vanessa laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You can't kick us out. You don't own anything. We'll see what the court says about that. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he grabbed his car keys from the table. Fine, we'll go. But don't come crying to us when you realize what you've done. And don't expect us to take you back when this all falls apart. They left. I heard the front door slam, heard their car start, heard the tires squeal as Daniel backed out too fast. Then silence. I stood in the dining room surrounded by half-eaten Thai food and expensive wine and started to shake. What had I done? What had I done? I sank into a chair, my legs giving out, and that's when the tears finally came. 15 years of tears all at once until I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only sob into my hands while the house echoed around me. Empty. So empty. Just like me. I didn't sleep that night either. I wandered through the house like a ghost, touching things that used to be mine. The kitchen table where Daniel had done his homework. The living room where we'd opened Christmas presents. The study where Richard and I had talked about our dreams. All of it felt foreign now. Contaminated. At 3 a.m, I found myself in Daniel's room, the master bedroom that used to be mine. Vanessa's clothes were everywhere. Her perfume bottles cluttered the dresser. Her shoes lined the closet. They'd erased me. Completely. I started pulling things off hangers. Slowly at first, then faster. Dresses and blouses and designer suits piled on the bed. I emptied drawers. Swept makeup into a trash bag. I was creating chaos and it felt good. It felt powerful. By dawn, I'd cleared out both their rooms. Everything was piled in the hallway. Clothes, shoes, toiletries, Daniel's suits, Vanessa's jewelry, all of it. I dragged it all downstairs and dumped it by the front door. Then I changed the locks. I had no idea if I had the legal right to do that. Didn't care. This was my house, and I was taking it back. Robert Chen called at 9. Mrs. Hale, it's Robert. I just got a very angry call from your son's lawyer. I kicked them out, I said. There was a pause. You did what? I told them to leave last night, and this morning I changed the locks. Mrs. Hale, was that wrong, legally? Another pause. No, actually, if the house is indeed in your name, you have every right to control who lives there, but you've just escalated the situation significantly. Good. Good? I'm done being walked over, Mr. Chen. I'm done being invisible. They want a fight? They'll get one. I heard him chuckle. Mrs. Hale, I think you're going to be a very interesting client. Can they force their way back in? Not without a court order, which they'll try to get, but it'll take time. In the meantime, I'd suggest you document everything. Take photos of the house as it is now. Gather any financial records you can find. And Mrs. Hale, don't be alone if they come back. Have someone with you. I don't have anyone. The words came out before I could stop them, and the truth of them hit me like a punch. I had no one. 15 years of isolation had seen to that. Then call me, Robert Chen said gently. Any time, day or night. You're not alone in this. But I was so alone. They came back that afternoon. I was in the kitchen when I heard the car, then pounding on the front door. Mom, open the door, Daniel's voice tight with rage. I didn't move. More pounding. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I walked to the window and looked out. Daniel and Vanessa stood on the porch, surrounded by suitcases I dumped there. Daniel's face was purple with fury. Vanessa looked like she was about to cry, probably because her precious designer clothes had spent the night outside. This is ridiculous, Daniel shouted. You can't lock us out of our own home. I opened the window. It's not your home. Mom, please, let's talk about this like adults. Adults don't steal from their mothers. I didn't steal. He took a breath, visibly trying to calm himself. Look, I know you're upset. I know the lawyer filled your head with a bunch of lies. But we can work this out. Just open the door. No. Mom, you have 10 seconds to get off my property before I call the police. Vanessa stepped forward. Margaret, be reasonable. Where are we supposed to go? I don't care. You're really going to do this after everything we've done for you? You mean after everything you've stolen from me? Her expression hardened. You're going to regret this. I already regret it. I regret the last 15 years, but at least now I can do something about it. I closed the window. Behind the glass, I watched Daniel pull out his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her perfectly made-up face. I should have felt guilty, should have felt something, but all I felt was cold, hard satisfaction. They loaded their suitcases into the car and drove away. And I stood in my house, and felt like I could breathe for the first time in 15 years. The silence lasted exactly 48 hours. 48 hours of living in my house alone for the first time in 15 years. 48 hours of walking through rooms without permission, eating when I wanted, watching what I wanted on television, sleeping in whatever bedroom I chose. I moved back into the master suite that first night. Vanessa's perfume still clung to the curtains, making me nauseous, but I didn't care. I stripped the bed, threw out her fancy Egyptian cotton sheets, and made it up with the quilts I'd sewn 30 years ago, the ones she'd banished to the attic because they were too country. It felt like reclaiming territory. But the quiet got to me faster than I expected. The house was too big, too empty. Every creak and groan made me jump. I kept expecting Daniel to burst through the door, or Vanessa to come clicking down the hallway in her heels, or someone to remind me I didn't belong here, that I was just the help. On the second night, I barely slept. Every sound became a threat. What if they came back? What if they broke in? What if they hurt me? I was 72 years old, alone in a house worth millions, sitting on a secret worth even more. I'd never felt more vulnerable in my life. The call came at 7 in the morning on day 3. Mrs. Hale, it's Robert Chen. We have a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Your son filed an emergency motion yesterday afternoon. He's asking the court to grant him immediate access to the house and to freeze all assets pending a competency hearing. Competency hearing, just like I'd heard them planning. They're actually doing it, I whispered. They're trying to have me declared insane. They're trying, Robert said carefully. Whether they'll succeed is another matter. But Margaret, I need you to understand what this means. Daniel's hired a very expensive legal team. They're going to come at you hard. They'll dig up every forgotten appointment, every confused moment, every time you've seemed disoriented or forgetful. They'll paint a picture of a woman who's no longer capable of managing her own affairs. I'm not incompetent. I know that, but we need to prove it. I'm scheduling you for an independent psychological evaluation. Today, if possible. Today. The hearing is in 5 days. We need ammunition, and we need it fast. 5 days. 5 days until I stood in front of a judge and had to prove I wasn't crazy. What if they win? I asked. What if the judge believes them? Robert was quiet for a moment. Then Daniel becomes your legal guardian. He'll control everything, your money, your property, your medical decisions, everything. I'd be trapped again, worse than trapped. I'd be a prisoner in my own life. We won't let that happen, Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed Daniel breakfast every morning for 18 years, and tried to remember if I'd ever shown signs of incompetence. Had I forgotten things? Yes. Everyone my age forgot things. Had I seemed confused sometimes? Maybe. Grief did that. Had I been manipulated, gaslit, and systematically diminished until I could barely recognize myself? Absolutely. But that wasn't incompetence, that was abuse. The question was whether a judge would see the difference. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for 2 that afternoon at a clinical office in Cambridge. Dr. Sarah Winters was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of my old college roommate. She sat across from me with a notepad and spent 20 minutes asking questions that felt like traps. How would you describe your relationship with your son? I thought about Daniel's face when he'd called me a burden, when he'd threatened to leave me homeless. Complicated, I said. Can you elaborate? Used to be close. After my husband died, things changed. Changed how? He became distant, started treating me like I was in the way. Dr. Winters wrote something down. Did you ever confront him about this? No. Why not? Because I was scared. Because I'd lost everything, and he was all I had left. Because I didn't know how to be anything other than small and quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of affection he threw my way. I didn't want to cause problems, I said instead. More writing. We moved on to memory tests. She gave me lists of words to remember, showed me pictures, and asked me to identify them later. Had me count backwards from 100 by 7s. I passed everything. Then she asked me to describe what I'd done yesterday. I spent the morning going through financial documents, I said. In the afternoon, I met with my lawyer to discuss my late husband's estate. In the evening, I made dinner and watched television. What did you watch? A documentary about the Romanov dynasty. Can you tell me what it was about? I told her, in detail, including facts about Anastasia and the controversy over the remains that the documentary had covered. Dr. Winters looked surprised. You have an excellent memory, Mrs. Hale. Is that unusual for someone my age? Not unusual, but combined with your other test results, it's clear you're functioning at a very high cognitive level. She set down her pen. Mrs. Hale, can I ask you something off the record? I tensed. Okay. Why do you think your son is pursuing this competency hearing? Because I'm suing him for my inheritance, and he thinks declaring you incompetent will stop that. Yes. She studied me for a long moment. Do you want to know what I think? Please. I think you've been living in a psychologically abusive environment for a very long time. I think you've been conditioned to doubt yourself, to minimize your own needs, to accept treatment that no person should accept. And I think your son is banking on that conditioning to make you seem unstable. Her words hit like a physical blow. But I'm not unstable, I said. No, you're traumatized. There's a difference. She leaned forward. Margaret, my evaluation is going to state very clearly that you are fully competent to manage your own affairs. You're sharp, aware, and functioning well. But I want you to understand something. Competence isn't just about cognitive ability. It's about having the emotional and psychological strength to advocate for yourself. Can you do that? Could I? 3 days ago, I would have said no. But I'd kick my son out of my house. I'd changed the locks. I'd hired a lawyer and started a fight I might not win. Yes, I said, I can. Dr. Winters smiled. Good, because you're going to need that strength in the days ahead. The next morning, Daniel's lawyer delivered a thick envelope to my door. Inside were 40 pages of legal documents, most of which I couldn't understand. But the cover letter was crystal clear. In the matter of Daniel Hale versus Margaret Hale, the petitioner requests an emergency hearing to determine the respondent's competency and to establish guardianship over the respondent's person and estate. Respondent: not mother, not Margaret. Respondent: like I was a problem to be solved. The attached affidavit made my blood run cold. Daniel had compiled a list of incidents, dozens of them, supposedly proving I was losing my mind. Subject has difficulty managing basic household tasks without supervision. Subject frequently appears confused about dates and times. Subject has expressed paranoid beliefs about family members stealing from her. Subject has become increasingly isolated and refuses to engage in social activities. Subject has demonstrated poor judgment in financial matters, evidenced by her recent decision to hire legal counsel based on false information. Every line was a distortion, a manipulation. Yes, I'd had trouble with household tasks because I was doing everything alone while they lived like royalty. Yes, I'd been confused about dates sometimes because I had no life beyond cooking and cleaning, so days blurred together. Yes, I'd accused them of stealing because they had. Yes, I was isolated because they'd systematically cut me off from everyone I knew. But reading it all laid out like that, clinical and damning, I could see how it would sound to a judge who didn't know the context. I sounded crazy, or worse, I sounded like a bitter old woman making up lies to hurt her devoted son. I called Robert Chen. They're painting me as delusional, I said, my voice shaking. I know, I got a copy this morning. What do? We fight back. We present Dr. Winter's evaluation. We show the forged signatures. We prove that you're not paranoid. You're right. They did steal from you. And if that's not enough, silence. Robert? Then we prepare for a long battle, he said quietly. But Margaret, you need to know something. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Daniel's team is going to come after you hard. They'll question everything. Your memory, your judgment, your mental state. They'll make you feel like you're the villain in the story. You need to be ready for that. I thought about the dinner party where Vanessa had called me not as spry as I used to be. About Daniel's dismissive tone when I'd asked questions. About 15 years of being treated like I was stupid, useless, invisible. I've been ready for 15 years, I said. I just didn't know it. The hearing was set for Monday morning at 9. I spent the weekend preparing. Robert came to the house on Saturday with a junior associate, a sharp young woman named Lisa Chen, who looked about 12 but talked like she'd been practicing law for decades. They drilled me for hours. They're going to ask about your daily routine. Be specific. Show them you're organized and capable. They'll bring up times you seem forgetful. Have explanations ready. They'll try to make you angry. Don't take the bait. Stay calm, stay rational. Remember, you're not just fighting for your money. You're fighting for your autonomy, for your right to control your own life. By Sunday night, my head was spinning with instructions and warnings and worst-case scenarios. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, I found myself standing in Daniel's old bedroom, the one he'd grown up in, before he and Vanessa took over the master suite. It was a guest room now, impersonal and bland, but I could still see traces of the boy he'd been. A nail hole in the wall where he'd hung his basketball posters, a scratch on the hardwood where he'd dragged his desk, a small stain on the carpet from when he'd spilled grape juice during a sleepover in 5th grade. I'd been so proud of him, so sure he'd grow up to be a good man. What had happened? When had he stopped being my Danny and become the stranger who'd steal from his own mother? Or had he always been this person and I'd just been too blind to see it? I went back to bed eventually, but sleep never came. The courthouse was a grey stone building that smelled like old paper and floor polish. Robert met me at the entrance, looking crisp in a navy suit, radiating confidence I didn't feel. Remember, he said as we walked through security, you're the victim here. Don't let them make you forget that. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a judge's bench that looked like it had been there since the 50s, Daniel was already seated at the plaintiff's table with his lawyers, 3 of them, all in expensive suits that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a year. He didn't look at me when I walked in. Vanessa sat in the gallery behind him, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. Her face was carefully neutral, but her eyes were cold. The judge entered. A woman in her 60s with steel grey hair and reading glasses on a chain. Judge Patricia Morrison, according to the nameplate on her bench. All rise. We stood. Please be seated. The formality of it all made me feel like I was watching myself from a distance. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my life, but it was. Judge Morrison looked over her papers, then fixed her gaze on Daniel's lead attorney, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a smile like a shark. Mr. Caldwell, you filed an emergency petition for guardianship. Please state your case. Caldwell stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, we're here today out of concern for Mrs. Margaret Hale's well-being. Over the past several years, Mrs. Hale has shown increasing signs of cognitive decline and poor judgment. Her son, Daniel Hale, has tried to care for her within the family home, but recent events have made it clear that Mrs. Hale requires professional oversight. Professional oversight, like I was a child. What recent events? Judge Morrison asked. Mrs. Hale has become convinced that her late husband's estate was mismanaged. She's hired legal counsel based on this belief and has taken hostile action against her own son, locking him out of the family home, making wild accusations of theft, and refusing to engage in rational discussion. We believe these behaviors indicate a break from reality that poses a danger to herself and others. A danger. He was calling me dangerous. Judge Morrison turned to Robert. Mr. Chen, your response? Robert stood, and I saw something in his posture that made me sit up straighter. He was ready for this. Your Honor, the only break from reality here is Mr. Caldwell's characterization of events. Mrs. Hale hasn't experienced any cognitive decline. She's experienced theft on a massive scale, perpetrated by the very son who now claims to be concerned about her well-being. Caldwell shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is making unsubstantiated allegations. Unsubstantiated? Robert pulled a folder from his briefcase. I have documentation right here showing that Daniel Hale forged his mother's signature on amended trust documents, illegally transferred $42 million worth of stock into his own name, and has been systematically draining her trust fund for 15 years. The only person who should be in front of this court is him, Your Honor. Charged with fraud. The courtroom erupted. Daniel's face went purple. Vanessa gasped. Caldwell was shouting objections. The judge was banging her gavel, and I just sat there watching it all unfold, feeling something like vindication burn in my chest. Finally, someone was saying it out loud. Order! Judge Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Caldwell, control your client. Mr. Chen, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them? I do, Your Honor. Extensive evidence, which is why we're filing a counter petition today, not just to dismiss Mr. Hale's guardianship request, but to pursue criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Criminal charges. Daniel could go to jail. My son could go to jail. I should have felt horror, guilt, some maternal instinct to protect him. Instead, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. This is highly irregular. Mr. Caldwell, were you aware of these allegations when you filed the guardianship petition? Your Honor, these are fabrications designed to... Were you aware? Caldwell's jaw tightened. We were aware Mrs. Hale had made accusations. We believe they're symptomatic of her mental deterioration. And you have evidence of this deterioration? We have an affidavit from Mr. Hale documenting years of concerning behavior. An affidavit from the accused party, Robert interjected. Not exactly reliable testimony. We also have statements from Mrs. Hale's daughter-in-law and from household staff. What household staff? I found myself saying. Everyone turned to look at me. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Hale? I stood up, my legs shaking but my voice steady. There is no household staff, Your Honor. I was the household staff. For 15 years, I cooked and cleaned and served them and their guests while they told people I was being cared for. But the truth is, I was working for free in my own home while they spent my money and lived off my dead husband's legacy. Mrs. Hale, Caldwell started. I'm not finished. I was surprised by the strength in my voice. You want to talk about poor judgment? The only poor judgment I showed was trusting my son, was believing him when he said he'd take care of everything after my husband died, was letting him convince me I was too old, too stupid, too broken to understand what was happening to my own life. Your Honor, this outburst is exactly what we're talking about him. This isn't an outburst, I said. This is the truth, and I'm done being silent about it. Judge Morrison studied me for a long moment. Then she looked at Robert. Mr. Chen, I'm going to need to see this evidence you mentioned. All of it, and I'm going to need an independent evaluation of Mrs. Hale's mental state. We have one, Your Honor. Dr. Sarah Winters conducted a comprehensive psychological evaluation 3 days ago. Her report states clearly that Mrs. Hale is fully competent and shows no signs of cognitive impairment. Caldwell stood again. Your Honor, we'd like to request our own evaluation. Denied. Judge Morrison's voice was sharp. You've had ample opportunity to present evidence of incompetence, and you've failed to do so beyond a self-serving affidavit from the accused party. What you have presented, however, is serious enough that I'm going to order a full investigation into the estate management claims. Daniel's face went white. In the meantime, the judge continued, the petition for guardianship is denied. Mrs. Hale retains full control over her person and property. Mr. Hale, you are hereby ordered to provide a complete accounting of all estate assets, trust distributions, and financial transactions related to your late father's holdings within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. Caldwell was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, we request a stay. Denied. And Mr. Hale, I'm issuing a restraining order. You are not to contact your mother or approach within 500 feet of her residence pending the outcome of this investigation. Do I make myself clear? Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mr. Hale, I asked you a question. Yes, he finally managed. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. We're adjourned. I expect to see both parties back here in 30 days with full documentation. It was over. Just like that, it was over. I stood there, not quite believing what had just happened. Around me, people were gathering papers, talking in hushed voices, filing out of the courtroom. Robert turned to me, grinning. That went well. We won? We won this round. The war's not over, but Margaret, you just landed a major blow. I looked across the courtroom. Daniel was standing with his lawyers, his face contorted with rage. He was staring at me, and the hatred in his eyes was so pure, so visceral, that I actually stepped back. Then Vanessa was there, pulling him toward the exit, whispering urgently in his ear. They left without looking back, and I stood in that courtroom, trembling with adrenaline and terror, and something that felt dangerously close to triumph. What happens now? I asked Robert. Now they have to open their books. Show us everything, and Margaret, when they do, I suspect we're going to find a lot more than just forged signatures. The call came at midnight. I was in bed, still too wired to sleep, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, breathing, heavy and deliberate. Hello, I said again. You're going to regret this. Vanessa's voice, low and vicious. You think you've won? You've just destroyed your own son. When this is over, when Daniel goes to prison because of you, you'll have nothing. No family. No one. You'll die alone in that big empty house, and no one will care. My hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? You're a pathetic old woman who doesn't know when to quit. You should have stayed in your place. Should have been grateful for what we gave you. You gave me nothing. You took everything. We gave you a home, we gave you purpose, and this is how you repay us? By lying to judges and destroying our lives? I didn't lie, and I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourselves. Daniel is a good man, a good son, and you're throwing him away for money you don't even need. The absurdity of it made me laugh. I don't need it, Vanessa, it's mine. It was always mine, and you knew that. Both of you knew that. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. The judge seemed to think so. Silence, then. We'll fight this. We have resources, lawyers, friends in high places. You're nobody, Margaret, and nobody trying to play in a game you don't understand. Then why are you calling me at midnight? If I'm nobody, why do I scare you so much? More silence. Stay away from my family, I said, and don't call this number again. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely set the phone down. I'd just threatened them back. I'd stood my ground, and it felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle, and thought about what Vanessa had said. When this is over, you'll have nothing. No family, no one. She was right. When this was over, when the dust settled and the lawyers finished fighting and the truth came out, I wouldn't have a son anymore. I'd have money, property, justice, maybe, but I wouldn't have family. Was it worth it? I thought about the dinner party, about being called not as spry, about serving food to people who didn't see me as human. I thought about 15 years of invisibility, about grief and loneliness and slow systematic erasure, about becoming so small I almost disappeared entirely. And I realized something. I'd already lost my family. I'd lost them the day Daniel forged my signature and decided his comfort was worth more than my dignity. This wasn't about choosing money over family. This was about choosing myself. Finally, after 72 years of putting everyone else first, I was choosing myself. Agedi. The next morning, I woke to find my front lawn covered in garbage. Someone, Daniel or Vanessa or one of their friends, had dumped trash all over the yard. Coffee grounds, rotting food, broken glass. There was graffiti spray painted on the driveway. Liar. I stood at the window looking at the mess and felt something inside me harden. They wanted war? Fine. I called the police first, then I called Robert. Document everything, he said. Take photos. Get a police report. This is harassment and it strengthens our case. They're trying to intimidate me. I know. Don't let them. After the police left, taking photos, making notes, looking at me with pity I didn't want, I went outside and started cleaning. It took 3 hours to bag all the garbage. My back screamed. My hands were raw. I was 72 years old, picking up trash in my own yard because my son wanted to punish me. But I didn't stop, because stopping would mean they'd won. By the time I finished, the sun was setting. I stood in my driveway, sweaty and exhausted, looking at the graffiti that wouldn't wash off. Liar. I wasn't the liar, but I'd be the one living with that word painted on my driveway until I could afford to have it professionally removed. That night, I dreamed about Richard. We were young again, sitting on the porch of our first apartment, a tiny one-bedroom in Somerville with windows that stuck and radiators that clanked. He was reading the newspaper, and I was drinking coffee, and everything was simple. I miss you, I said in the dream. He looked up, smiling that crooked smile I'd fallen in love with. You're doing fine, Maggie. I'm destroying our son. No, you're saving yourself. Same thing. No. He set down the paper, reaching for my hand. Not even close. I woke up crying, the dream already fading, but his words stayed with me. You're saving yourself. Maybe that had to be enough. The 30 days passed like a slow-motion car crash. Every morning I woke up expecting something terrible to happen. More garbage on my lawn. Threatening calls. Maybe Daniel showing up despite the restraining order, ready to finish what his midnight phone calls had started. But the terrible thing that happened was worse than any of that. It was silence. Complete, suffocating silence. No calls. No visits. No contact at all except through lawyers, who sent letters so cold and formal they could have been about strangers. Daniel's accounting came in on day 28, 2 days before the deadline. Robert called me as soon as he received it. "Margaret, you need to sit down." I was already sitting, staring out the kitchen window at the garden I'd planted 30 years ago. It was overgrown now. I hadn't had the energy to maintain it. I'm sitting. "It's worse than we thought." My stomach clenched. "How much worse?" The initial estimate was 42 million in stocks, but that was just the Hale Industries shares. There were other investments, real estate holdings, a life insurance policy worth 3 million that was supposed to pay out to you, municipal bonds, treasury notes. Margaret, your husband's total estate was worth nearly $68 million. $68 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. And Daniel took it all? My voice sounded strange, distant. "Not all. He left you the $1,500 monthly stipend in the trust, which you never received because he never set up the distribution. Everything else went into accounts he controlled. And Margaret, there's more." "More?" "He's been selling off assets, liquidating investments. In the last 15 years, he's gone through approximately $43 million. I couldn't breathe. Where did it go? The house renovations, Vanessa's shopping habits. We have credit card statements showing hundreds of thousands in luxury purchases, cars, a vacation home in the Hamptons that's in Daniel's name, private school tuition for a nephew I didn't know existed. And Margaret, there are wire transfers to offshore accounts, lots of them. He's been hiding money. Can we get it back?" Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Some of it. Maybe half, if we're lucky. The rest is gone. Spent, hidden. It'll take years to trace it all, and even then we might never recover everything. Years. I was 72 years old. How many years did I have left? But the house," Robert continued, "is definitely yours, and the remaining Hale Industries shares, about 25 million worth. That's not nothing, Margaret. That's enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life, enough to hire staff, travel, do whatever you want. You won't be poor." "No, I wouldn't be poor. I'd just be robbed by my own son, who'd spent my money on a Hamptons beach house while I scrubbed his floors." "When's the next hearing?" I asked. "Next Monday. The judge is going to want answers about these discrepancies. Margaret, this is going to be bad for Daniel. Really bad. We're talking criminal charges now. Fraud, embezzlement, possibly money laundering, if those offshore accounts can be traced back to illegal activity." "Good. Margaret, I mean it. Good. He deserves whatever he gets." Robert sighed. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I need you to prepare yourself for what's coming. The media is going to pick this up. A wealthy widow defrauded by her son. It's a story. People are going to have opinions. Some of them won't be kind. Let them talk. They'll say you're vindictive, that you're tearing apart your family over money, that you should forgive and move on. People who say that have never been where I am." "No, Robert agreed quietly. "They haven't." After we hung up, I sat in that kitchen for hours, watching the light change, thinking about $68 million. Richard had worked his whole life to build that wealth, not for himself. He'd lived modestly, drove a 10-year-old car, bought his suits on sale. He'd built it for us, for our future, for our security, for Daniel's inheritance, yes, but not like this, never like this. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I took a bath in the master bathroom, Vanessa's former sanctuary, with the heated floors and the soaking tub that cost more than a car. I filled it with bubbles, poured myself a glass of wine from Richard's collection, and sat in water so hot it turned my skin pink. And I let myself cry, not quiet, dignified tears, ugly, gasping sobs that echoed off the marble tiles. 15 years of grief and rage and humiliation pouring out all at once. I cried for Richard, who trusted Daniel to take care of me. I cried for the relationship I'd lost with my son. I cried for the grandmother I'd never become, because Daniel and Vanessa had decided kids were too much responsibility. I cried for myself, for the woman I'd been before grief made me small, before manipulation made me doubt everything, before I'd spent 15 years being invisible in my own home. When the water turned cold and the tears finally stopped, I felt empty, but also lighter, like I'd purged something toxic that had been poisoning me from the inside. I got out, dried off, and looked at myself in the mirror. I was old. No denying that. My skin was creased, my hair was grey, my body was soft where it used to be firm, but my eyes were clear, and for the first time in years I recognized the woman staring back at me. The next Monday the courtroom was packed. Robert had been right about the media. There were reporters in the gallery, cameras outside, a news van parked across the street. Someone had leaked the story, and now everyone wanted to watch the spectacle of a family destroying itself over money. I wore my navy dress again, the same one from the first hearing. It felt like armor now. Daniel arrived with his legal team, but this time there were only 2 lawyers instead of 3. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Vanessa wasn't with him. That surprised me more than anything. Judge Morrison entered, and we all rose. She looked grim as she surveyed the packed courtroom. "Mr. Caldwell, I've reviewed the financial accounting your client submitted. I have questions." Caldwell stood, buttoning his jacket, but his usual confidence was gone. "Yes, Your Honor. Where is the $3 million life insurance payout?" "That was used for estate taxes and legal fees." "Estate taxes on a trust don't work that way, Mr. Caldwell. Try again." Caldwell glanced at Daniel, who was staring at the table. "I'd need to consult with my client." "Your client is sitting right there. Mr. Hale, where is the insurance money?" Daniel stood slowly. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Some of it went to estate costs. The rest was invested." "Invested where?" "Various accounts." "In your name?" He didn't answer. "Mr. Hale, I asked you a question. Were these investments in your name or your mother's?" "Mine," he said quietly. "So you took $3 million that was supposed to go to your mother and invested it for yourself?" "I was managing her assets." "Without her knowledge or consent. That's not management, Mr. Hale. That's theft." Judge Morrison flipped through more papers, and these wire transfers to offshore accounts. 47 separate transactions over 12 years, totaling nearly $18 million. "Explain." Daniel's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, those were legitimate business expenses." $18 million in business expenses to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland? Judge Morrison removed her glasses, fixing Daniel with a look that could melt steel. "Mr. Hale, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is your mother's money?" The courtroom was completely silent. Daniel's hands were shaking. "I spent it," gasps from the gallery. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God." "You spent $18 million, Judge Morrison repeated. "Yes." "On what?" "Living expenses, investments, the houses, Vanessa's." He stopped. "Vanessa's what?" He looked up and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Shame. "Vanessa's needs. She has expensive tastes. She wanted things. The renovations, the cars, the clothes, the jewelry. She kept saying we deserved it, that my father would have wanted us to live well." "So you stole from your mother to fund your wife's shopping habits?" "It wasn't supposed to be stealing. I thought eventually when Mom passed it would all come to me anyway. I was just accessing my inheritance early." The words hit me like a slap. When Mom passed, he'd been waiting for me to die, planning his life around my death, spending my money because he figured I wouldn't live long enough to notice. I must have made a sound because Robert reached over and squeezed my hand. Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, do you understand what you've just admitted to in open court?" Daniel seemed to realize what he'd done. His face went white. "I need to speak with my attorney." "Too late for that. Based on your admission and the evidence presented, I'm finding probable cause for criminal fraud and embezzlement charges. Bailiff, please take Mr. Hale into custody." The courtroom erupted. Daniel's lawyers were shouting. Reporters were scribbling frantically. Someone was crying, one of Daniel's friends from the gallery, maybe. And I just sat there watching as a bailiff approached my son and asked him to stand. "Your Honor, please." Daniel's voice cracked. "I'll pay it back, all of it. Just give me time." "Well, you've had 15 years, Mr. Hale. Time's up." They handcuffed him. Actually handcuffed my son, right there in court, while cameras flashed and reporters whispered and the whole world watched. He looked at me as they led him past. Our eyes met, and I saw him, really saw him, maybe for the first time in years. Not the successful businessman, not the devoted son, just a man who'd made terrible choices and was finally facing consequences. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please." I didn't look away, didn't soften. "You should have thought of that before you stole from me," I said. Then they took him away, and I was left sitting in a courtroom full of strangers, feeling absolutely nothing. The reporters caught me outside. "Mrs. Hale, how do you feel about your son's arrest?" "Mrs. Hale, do you plan to pursue full prosecution?" "Mrs. Hale, some people are saying you're being too harsh. What's your response?" Robert tried to push through them, but I stopped him. I turned to the cameras, to the microphones being shoved in my face, and I spoke. "My son stole $68 million from me. He forged my signature. He lied to courts. He spent 15 years treating me like a servant while living off money that was legally mine. And then, when I discovered the truth, he tried to have me declared incompetent so he could keep controlling everything." I paused, letting that sink in. "So yes, I'm pursuing full prosecution, because theft is theft, fraud is fraud, and family doesn't get a pass for destroying the people who love them." "But he's your son." "He was my son," I said. "The boy I raised would never have done this. The man who did this is a stranger to me." More questions, but Robert was pulling me away, guiding me to his car while the reporters shouted after us. We drove in silence for several blocks. Then Robert said, "That was brave. That was necessary. You know this isn't over. Daniel will probably take a plea deal to avoid trial. But Vanessa, she's going to come after you now. She'll blame you for everything. Let her. Margaret, I'm not afraid anymore, Robert. I've lost everything that mattered. My husband, my son, 15 years of my life. What else can they take from me?" He didn't have an answer for that. Vanessa showed up at my house that night. I was in the living room trying to read, but mostly just staring at the pages when I heard pounding on the door. "Margaret, open this door." I'd been expecting this. Part of me was even looking forward to it. I opened the door. Vanessa stood on my porch, still in the black dress from court, her makeup smeared, her hair a mess. She looked nothing like the polished woman who'd humiliated me at the dinner party. She looked destroyed. "You put him in jail," she said, her voice shaking. "Your own son. You put him in jail." "No, he put himself in jail. He was trying to take care of us, to build a life, and you couldn't stand it, could you? Couldn't stand seeing us happy. Happy. Vanessa, you were happy spending my money, living in my house, treating me like garbage. That's not happiness, that's cruelty. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing." The words came out louder than I intended. "You took everything, my home, my dignity, my money, my son. You turned him into someone I don't even recognize, and you did it all while smiling and pretending you were doing me a favor." Vanessa's face twisted. "You bitter old woman. You're doing this because you're jealous, because I have youth and beauty and Daniel loves me more than he ever loved you." I actually laughed. "Daniel doesn't love you, Vanessa. He loves what you represent, status, success, the fantasy of a perfect life. But you know what? That life was built on stolen money, and now it's gone. So let's see how long his love lasts when there's nothing left to spend. He'll get out, he'll fix this, and when he does, you'll have nothing. No son, no family, just money. And you'll die alone, counting your millions." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll die free. Can you say the same?" She raised her hand like she was going to slap me. I didn't flinch. She lowered it slowly, and I saw something in her eyes that looked like fear. "Get off my property," I said quietly, "and don't come back." For a moment she just stood there. Then she turned and ran to her car, stumbling in her heels, and drove away so fast the tires squealed. I closed the door and locked it. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and realized my hands were steady. For the first time in weeks, my hands were completely steady. The news coverage was brutal. They called me the vengeful widow, the unforgiving mother. One tabloid ran a headline that said, "Mother's greed destroys family." They interviewed Daniel's friends, who painted him as a devoted son driven to desperate measures by an ungrateful mother. They found people from the charity board who said Vanessa had always spoken so lovingly about taking care of me. They made me the villain. But they also found other people. Richard's old colleagues from Hale Industries who remembered me. Friends from my old book club who'd lost touch after Richard died. A neighbor who'd noticed how I never left the house unless it was to run errands. She used to be so vibrant, one woman said on camera. After Richard died, she just disappeared. I tried calling a few times, but Daniel always said she was resting. Eventually, I stopped trying. Slowly, the narrative started to shift. From vengeful mother to victim. From greedy widow to survivor. The day Daniel took the plea deal, pleading guilty to fraud and embezzlement in exchange for a 7-year sentence with possibility of parole in 4, the headline read, "Son admits to defrauding elderly mother." I didn't feel victorious reading it. I just felt tired. 3 weeks after Daniel went to prison, I got a letter. It was addressed in his handwriting, forwarded through his lawyer. I almost threw it away, unopened. But something made me sit down at the kitchen table and carefully tear the envelope. The letter was 2 pages front and back, his handwriting getting messier as it went on. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much now. I know sorry doesn't give you back 15 years, doesn't give you back the money I spent or the dignity I took or the relationship we used to have. But I'm sorry anyway. I don't know when it started, when I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as an obstacle, when I convinced myself that the money was more mine than yours, when I let Vanessa talk me into things I knew were wrong. Actually, that's a lie. I do know when it started. It started the day Dad died, and I realized I could take everything, that I had the power to do it. And once I started, it was so easy to keep going. You were grieving, you weren't paying attention, and I told myself I was helping you, protecting you from the burden of managing so much money. But really, I was just protecting my access to it. Vanessa left me, by the way, filed for divorce the day I was sentenced. Turns out she wasn't interested in being married to someone without money. Who knew? I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I deserve everything that's happened. I just thought you should know that you were right. She never loved me. She loved what I could give her, and I loved her more than I loved you. That's the part I can't forgive myself for. Not the theft, not the fraud, the fact that I chose her over you, over and over again, until there was nothing left of the son you raised. I don't know if he's still in here somewhere, the boy who brought you flowers, who used to help you bake cookies, who cried on your shoulder when Sarah broke up with him in 10th grade. I hope he is. I'm trying to find him. I'm not asking you to write back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What I did, what I became. And I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Daniel, I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the table. I didn't cry, didn't feel anger or satisfaction or even sadness. I just felt empty. Sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was something. So that night I made myself dinner for the first time in weeks. Real dinner. Roasted chicken with vegetables, mashed potatoes, a salad. I set the table with the good china, poured a glass of wine, lit candles, and I ate alone in the dining room where I used to serve Vanessa's guests. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt like reclaiming territory. After dinner, I washed the dishes, dried them, put them away. Then I walked through the house, turning on lights in every room. The study, the living room, the bedrooms, even the third floor guest suite where I'd lived for so many years. I stood in that small room with its slanted ceiling and stuck window, and I thought about the woman who'd slept here, who'd accepted this, who'd made herself small enough to fit into a space that was never meant for her. "I'm sorry," I said out loud. Not to Daniel, to her, to the version of myself I'd abandoned somewhere along the way. "I'm sorry I let them do that to you. I'm sorry I didn't fight back sooner." The room didn't answer, but I felt something shift anyway, something like forgiveness, not for Daniel, for myself. I woke up the next morning and realized I had no idea what to do with myself. For 15 years, my days had been defined by other people's needs. Cook breakfast, clean the bathrooms, run errands, serve dinner, disappear, repeat. Now there was no one to cook for, no one to clean up after, no one's schedule to work around, just me, and an empty house that suddenly felt too big. I made coffee, the expensive kind Vanessa used to insist on, the kind I'd never been allowed to touch. I sat at the kitchen table in my bathrobe, drinking it slowly, and thought about what comes after revenge, because that's what this had been, hadn't it? Revenge dressed up as justice, getting back at the people who'd hurt me, making them pay, and they had paid. Daniel was in prison. Vanessa had lost everything. I had my house back, my money back, my dignity back. So why did I still feel so hollow? The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. Robert had said he'd call before visiting, and I didn't know anyone else anymore. Through the peephole, I saw a woman about my age, grey hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" Her face broke into a smile. "Margaret, it's me, Carol Brennan, from the book club, Carol." I hadn't seen her in almost 16 years. Not since right after Richard died, when she'd called a few times and Daniel had told her I wasn't up for visitors. "Carol," I breathed. "I saw you on the news," she said, "and I thought you might need a friend." I started crying before I could stop myself. Carol didn't say anything. She just stepped inside and wrapped her arms around me, and I sobbed into her shoulder like a child. "I'm sorry," I finally managed, pulling away. "I don't know where that came from. Don't apologize. You've been through hell." She looked around the house, her expression unreadable. "Can we sit? I'd like to hear what really happened. Not the news version, your version." We sat in the living room, the room where I used to hide when Vanessa had guests, and I told her everything. The whole ugly story, from Richard's death to Daniel's arrest. I didn't leave anything out. The humiliation, the theft, the years of being invisible. Carol listened without interrupting, her hand on mine the whole time. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That son of a bitch," she said finally. I laughed. Couldn't help it. "Which one? Daniel or Richard?" "Both. Richard for not making his wishes crystal clear. Daniel for being a greedy bastard." She squeezed my hand. "But mostly Daniel. Margaret, what he did to you, there aren't words for that level of betrayal. The news seems to think I overreacted. The news can go to hell. You did what you had to do, and anyone who says otherwise has never been in your position." She paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What are you going to do now?" It was the question I'd been avoiding all morning. "I don't know," I admitted. "I got my house back, my money, but I don't know what to do with any of it. For 15 years I had no choices, and now I have too many, and I'm paralyzed." "Then let's start small," Carol said. "What did you use to love? Before Richard died, before everything fell apart, what made you happy?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Art," I said finally. "I used to paint, watercolors mostly. I wasn't very good, but I loved it." "So paint again." "I'm 72 years old. So what? You think there's an age limit on joy?" Carol stood up. "Come on, get dressed. We're going shopping." "Shopping?" "For art supplies. And then we're getting lunch somewhere nice. Somewhere you actually want to eat, not somewhere Vanessa would have chosen. And then we're going to start figuring out what Margaret Hale wants out of the rest of her life." Out. We spent that afternoon in an art supply store that smelled like paint and possibility. Carol helped me choose brushes, paper, a portable easel. I bought more than I needed just because I could. Just because no one was going to tell me it was wasteful. Over lunch at a little Vietnamese restaurant Carol loved, she caught me up on the book club, who'd gotten divorced, who'd moved, who'd passed away, people I'd lost touch with, a whole life that had continued without me. You should come back, Carol said. We meet every other Thursday. Same coffee shop we always used. I don't know if I'd be welcome after everything that's been in the news. Margaret, half those women have been through divorces, family drama, financial disasters. Trust me, they're not going to judge you for standing up for yourself. She paused. And the ones who do, screw them. You don't need people in your life who think you should have stayed silent about being robbed. It sounded so simple when she said it like that. I went to the next book club meeting. Walking into that coffee shop felt like stepping through a portal to my old life. The same mismatched furniture, the same bad art on the walls, the same smell of coffee and cinnamon, and the women, some I recognized, some new, who looked up when I entered. There was a moment of silence, of assessment. Then Linda Morrison, who'd been in the club since the beginning, stood up and crossed the room. Margaret Hale, she said, it's about damn time you came back. She hugged me hard and the rest of the women followed. Questions came, rapid fire. How was I holding up? Did I need anything? Had I heard about the new Louise Penny novel? No one mentioned Daniel. No one asked about the trial. They just welcomed me back, like I'd never left. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The weeks turned into months. I started painting again. Terrible watercolors at first. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and I'd forgotten basic techniques. But Carol sat with me in the garden, painting her own terrible watercolors, and we laughed at how bad we both were. Slowly, I got better. I took a class at the community center, learned about new techniques, new materials, met other people who painted just for the joy of it, not to be good, just to create. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping women who'd left abusive situations, who had nothing, who were trying to rebuild their lives. I couldn't fix their problems, couldn't give them back what they'd lost, but I could listen. I could tell them they weren't crazy, that they deserved better, that it was never too late to start over. One woman, maybe 40, with bruises still fading on her arms, looked at me with tears in her eyes. How do you move on? She asked. How do you stop being angry? I thought about Daniel's letter, about Vanessa's tears, about all the rage I'd carried for so long. I don't know if you do, I said honestly. I'm still angry. Maybe I always will be, but I'm learning that anger doesn't have to define me. It can coexist with other things. Joy, hope, peace. They're all in here together fighting for space. Which one wins? Whichever one I feed, I said, and I'm trying to feed the good ones more. 6 months after Daniel's sentencing, Robert called with news. We've recovered about 32 million from the various accounts. Some of the offshore money is still tied up in legal proceedings, but this is yours now. Free and clear. $32 million. Less than half of what Richard had left me, but still more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What should I do with it? I asked. That's entirely up to you. Invest it. Spend it. Give it away. It's yours, Margaret. Mine. The word still felt strange. I hired a financial advisor, someone Robert recommended, someone who had no connection to Daniel or Hale Industries. We set up a trust, invested conservatively, made sure I'd never have to worry about money again. And then I started giving it away. Not all of it. I wasn't a saint. I kept enough to live comfortably, to hire someone to help with the house and garden, to travel if I wanted, to buy art supplies whenever the mood struck. But the rest, I put it to work. I established a fund for elderly people who'd been victims of financial abuse. Lawyers, advocates, support services, all free for people who couldn't afford to fight back against the family members who'd stolen from them. Because I could afford lawyers, I could afford to fight, but so many couldn't. I donated to the women's shelter, to art programs for kids, to a scholarship fund at the community college in Richard's name. Every donation felt like reclaiming something, like taking the money Daniel had stolen and spent on status symbols and turning it into something that actually mattered, turning pain into purpose. A year after the trial, I got another letter from Daniel. This one was shorter. Mom, I heard about the foundation you started, the one for financial abuse victims. I don't know if this will mean anything, but I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to be. I know I'm the reason you needed to start it in the first place. But seeing you take something terrible and turn it into something that helps people, that's the mom I remember. The one who always found ways to make things better. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that what you're doing matters. And that somewhere in here, the son you raised is proud of you for doing it. Daniel. I read it once, then put it in a drawer with the first letter. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday the anger would fade enough to allow for conversation. But not today. Today, I was still healing. The board meeting was the first one I'd attended in person. After Richard died, Daniel had voted my shares by proxy. I hadn't even known I was a shareholder until Robert told me. Now, sitting at the long conference table at Hale Industries headquarters, surrounded by men in expensive suits who looked at me with barely concealed curiosity, I felt Richard's presence more strongly than I had in years. He'd sat in this room, made decisions in this room, built his legacy in this room. And now it was my turn. Mrs. Hale, the CEO, said, "We're pleased to have you joining us. Your late husband was a valued partner, and we're looking forward to your input." Translation: please don't rock the boat. "Thank you," I said. "I've reviewed the quarterly reports. I have some questions." I saw several men exchange glances. "Of course," the CEO said. "What would you like to know?" Why are we still using suppliers in countries with poor labor practices when we could source domestically for only marginally higher costs? And why has the employee profit sharing program been cut 3 times in the last 5 years, while executive bonuses have increased? Silence. Those are complex questions. They're not complex, I said. They're ethical, and I'd like answers before I vote on any new initiatives. More silence. Then one man, older, probably in his 70s, started laughing. "Richard always said you were the smart one," he said. Looks like he was right. The meeting shifted after that. They started actually answering my questions instead of deflecting. Started treating me like I belonged there instead of like a confused old woman who'd wandered in by accident. By the end, I'd voted against 2 initiatives and demanded revisions on a 3rd. And I'd never felt more powerful in my life. Let's see. 2 years after everything fell apart, I sold the house. It wasn't an easy decision. That house held 40 years of memories. Good ones from when Richard was alive and terrible ones from after. But walking through it every day, I kept seeing ghosts. Richard at the breakfast table. Daniel as a little boy, racing through the hallways. Vanessa's sneer. My own small room on the 3rd floor. I needed a fresh start. I bought a condo downtown, smaller, modern, with big windows and no history. A place where I could be whoever I wanted to be, not whoever I'd been. The book club threw me a moving party. Carol helped me pack. We went through boxes of old photos, and I let myself cry over the good memories. Richard and me on our honeymoon, Daniel's first birthday, family Christmases when things were simple. You can keep the good parts, Carol said, even when the rest is broken. I kept those photos, threw away the recent ones, the forced smiles at Vanessa's parties, the carefully staged family portraits that were all lies. The new condo felt like possibility, like a life that was just beginning instead of ending. I painted the walls myself, colors I chose, colors Vanessa would have hated. I decorated with art from local galleries and furniture I actually liked instead of pieces chosen to impress. And I hung my watercolors on the walls, my terrible, wonderful, imperfect watercolors that I'd made with my own hands. On what would have been Richard's 80th birthday, I went to his grave. I hadn't been since the funeral, couldn't bear to face it, but standing there now, looking at his headstone with fresh flowers someone else had left, probably someone from Hale Industries. I felt ready. "I'm sorry it took so long," I said. "I was angry at you for a while for not being more careful with your estate planning, for not protecting me better, for dying and leaving me alone with Daniel." The words felt silly, talking to a headstone, but also necessary. "But I understand now. You couldn't have known what he'd become. Neither of us could." I sat down on the grass, not caring that it was damp. "I think you'd be disappointed in him, but I also think you'd be proud of me, for fighting back, for not staying invisible." The wind rustled through the trees overhead. "I sold the house. I know you loved it, but I couldn't stay there anymore. Too many bad memories covering up the good ones. I bought a condo. It's small, but it's mine. Really mine. And I'm happy there. Happy. When had I last been happy? I started painting again. Remember how you used to tease me about my terrible trees? They're still terrible, but I love making them." I pulled a photo from my purse, one of me at the last book club meeting, laughing at something Linda had said. Carol had snapped it on her phone and printed it for me. "That's who I am now," I said, setting it against the headstone. Not the woman who was too broken to fight, not the ghost in our son's house, just me, Margaret, still here, still fighting, still learning how to be happy again. I stayed until the sun started to set, talking to Richard about everything and nothing. The foundation, the board meetings, the terrible romance novel the book club had just read. And when I finally stood to leave, brushing grass off my jeans, I felt lighter than I had in years. "Goodbye, Richard," I said. "I'll always love you, but I have to keep living. And I'm finally figuring out how." 3 years after Daniel went to prison, he was granted parole. Robert called to tell me he's required to stay in Massachusetts and check in with a parole officer weekly. He's prohibited from contacting you unless you initiate it. And Margaret, there are conditions. He has to pay restitution, what's left of what he stole. It'll take him the rest of his life, but it's something. "How much did they recover in total?" I asked. "About 41 million. Not everything, but close. Close. I'd started with 68 million. Now I had about 41 million plus what I'd recovered. Still missing 27 million. Still missing the 15 years he'd stolen. But it was enough." "Has he tried to contact you?" Robert asked. "Letters. I don't respond. Are you going to?" I thought about it. About the son I'd raised, and the man he'd become, and the stranger who wrote those letters from prison. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, when I'm ready, if I'm ever ready." 4 years after everything changed, I met someone. His name was Frank. He was 78, a widower who'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. We met at a painting class. He was terrible at watercolors too, and we bonded over our shared incompetence. He asked me to coffee. I almost said no, almost said I was too old for this, too broken, too complicated. But then I thought, why not? We went to the same Vietnamese restaurant where Carol had taken me. We talked about art and books and our late spouses and all the ways grief had reshaped us. He didn't ask about the news stories, didn't mention Daniel or the trial or any of it. He just asked about me, what I liked, what I wanted, who I was now, not who I'd been. At the end of coffee, he said, "I'd like to see you again if you're interested." I was 76 years old. I had grey hair and wrinkles and a body that ached when it rained. I had a son in prison and a fortune built on betrayal, and more baggage than any sane person would want to deal with. "I'm interested," I said. We dated slowly, carefully. Two broken people learning to trust again. He met Carol and the book club. I met his kids, both daughters, both wary of me at first, protective of their father. I didn't blame them. I'd been there. 6 months in, over dinner at his place, he asked, "What happened with your son? I've heard pieces, but I'd like to hear your version." So I told him all of it. He listened without judgment, holding my hand across the table. When I finished, he said, "That took incredible courage, standing up to your own child. Most people never could. Most people aren't given a choice between courage and erasure. Still, you chose yourself. That's not nothing. Chose myself. Yes, that's exactly what I'd done. And I'd keep choosing myself every day for however many days I had left. 5 years after Daniel's arrest, on an ordinary Tuesday in March, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find him standing there, older, thinner, grey starting to show in his hair, lines carved deep around his eyes. He looked nothing like the polished businessman who'd called me a burden. He looked tired, worn down, human. We stared at each other. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," he said finally. "I know you didn't want contact, but I had to see you. To say this in person, not in a letter." "Say what?" "I'm sorry, I know I've said it before. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand now. What I did, what I took from you, it wasn't just money. It was your dignity, your autonomy, your sense of self. And I'm sorry, so sorry. I should have been angry, should have slammed the door in his face. Instead, I just felt tired. Why now?" I asked. "Why come here now?" "Because I'm dying." The words hit me like a punch. "What?" "Cancer. Pancreatic. They gave me 6 months, maybe less." He smiled, but it was sad. "Calm as a bitch, huh?" I couldn't speak, couldn't process it. My son, my Danny, who I'd carried and raised and loved, was dying. "I'm not here for forgiveness," he said quickly. "I'm not here to make you feel bad or to ask you to take care of me or anything like that. I have hospice. I have, well, not much else, but that's my own fault. I'm here because I needed to look you in the eye and tell you that you were right about everything, and that the best thing my life produced was showing other people through your foundation that they don't have to accept abuse from family, that they can fight back." Tears were running down my face. When had I started crying? "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What you did, you saved yourself, and in doing that you saved a lot of other people too." He turned to leave, then paused. "I love you, Mom. I know I didn't show it. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed. But I love you, and I'm proud of who you've become." He walked away, and I stood in the doorway watching him go, feeling 15 years of anger and pain and betrayal crash over me all at once. I didn't visit him in hospice. I wanted to. Part of me wanted to go, to sit by his bedside, to forgive him before it was too late, but I couldn't, because forgiveness isn't something you owe someone just because they're dying. Forgiveness is something you give when you're ready, if you're ever ready. And I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Daniel died on a Wednesday in June. The hospice called to tell me. He'd been alone at the end. No visitors, no family. Just like Vanessa had predicted I'd be, except I wasn't alone. I had Carol. I had Frank. I had the book club and my painting students and the woman from the shelter who sent me cards on my birthday. I had a life, a real one. I didn't go to the funeral, sent flowers instead, unsigned. And that night I painted. Not Daniel, not the house, not any of the pain. I painted the sunrise I'd seen that morning from my condo window, pink and gold and purple, spilling across the sky like hope. It was the best thing I'd ever created. Now, at 79, I sit in my condo with Frank beside me, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors I'll try to capture tomorrow. My watercolors hang on every wall, proof that I'm still here, still creating, still becoming. The foundation I started has helped over 300 people reclaim their lives from abusive family members. 300 people who didn't have to stay invisible. The book club still meets every other Thursday. We're reading a mystery this month, something light. And sometimes when I'm alone, I think about Daniel, about who he was and who he became and the impossible distance between those two people. I think about forgiveness and whether I should have given it to him before he died. But mostly I think about myself, about the woman who spent 15 years disappearing, and the woman who clawed her way back to visibility. They're both me, both part of my story, and I'm okay with that. Because here's what I've learned. Your family doesn't get a pass for destroying you just because they're blood. Love doesn't mean accepting cruelty, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself, even when everyone tells you you're being selfish. I'm not a perfect person. I made mistakes. I stayed silent too long. I let myself become small. But I fought my way back, and every single day I wake up in my own space, make my own choices, live my own life is a victory. Not over Daniel, over the woman I used to be, the one who thought she deserved to be invisible. Frank squeezes my hand, pulling me back to the present. What are you thinking about? He asks. I look at him, this kind man who loves me, wrinkles and baggage and all. I'm thinking about how far I've come, I say, and that I'm not done yet, not by a long shot. He smiles. Good, because I'm not either. We sit together as the sun sets. Two people who've survived their own separate wars, learning to build something new in the aftermath. And somewhere in my heart, in the space where anger used to live, I feel something that might be peace starting to take root. It's small, fragile, new, but it's mine. And after everything I've been through, everything I've lost, and everything I've reclaimed, that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.